Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, protesters accuse security forces of having deliberately dumped bodies into the Nile to hide the scale of a bloody crackdown on rallies in Sudan earlier this week. The death toll is now reckoned to be above 100. Tensions see pro-democracy demonstrators knock back an offer for talks from the ruling military council. Also, Zimbabwe paves the way for more financial help from the EU by restarting talks with the bloc. It may turn the page on the decades of tense relations that marked the 40 years of rule under previous Zimbabwean leader Robert Mugabe. And Cameroonian football fans are roaring to get behind the Indomitable lionesses ahead of the Women's World Cup, which kicks off this Friday. The star players have helped fuel a surge in enthusiasm for the game amongst girls in the country. But first, Sudanese doctors say that the death toll from Monday's violent crackdown on pro-democracy demonstrators has risen to above 100 after dozens of bodies were recovered from the Nile. Protest leaders say that they are not interested in an offer of talks from the ruling military council that's been running the country since Omar al-Bashir was forced from power in April. Campaigners say that they'll be keeping up a campaign of civil disobedience.
A violent crackdown continues on the streets of the Sudanese capital, where the government has been using force to silence the peaceful opposition movement. Earlier on Wednesday, 40 bodies were pulled from the Nile River, raising the death toll. That's according to the country's doctors' union, who've also claimed that security forces have been attacking hospitals and staff. Sudan's ruling Transitional Military Council, for its part, has vowed to launch a probe into cases of violence.
The council has initiated an independent investigation, an urgent and transparent investigation with rapid results. No one can evade punishment. Anyone who crossed the lines has to be punished.
This comes as Sudan's army ruler, in a policy U-turn, said he was open to negotiations. In a conversation with France 24, however, one activist said that offer has been rejected because the military could not be trusted. Hajooj Kuka's words echoing the position of the country's protest organizers.
At this point, we feel like the one thing they need to do is hand over power to civilians. To actually halt talks, we need a few things happening. One, we need the Rapid Response Force to be removed from Khartoum. Right now, we feel like we're being colonized by the Rapid Response Forces. They're all over the place. You can't leave the house without them stopping you, checking your phones, beating you up. The other thing is we need internet back. We don't have internet. The only reason I have internet access is because I have land internet, which is very rare.
For now, the future of Sudan hangs in the balance in the tug-of-war between civilian protesters and the military. This has been the case since the removal of President Omar al-Bashir in April.
Now, ambassadors from the European Union opened formal talks with Zimbabwe's government on Wednesday for the first time in more than 15 years. It's all in a bid to restart dialogue that soured under former President Robert Mugabe. Delegates will be tackling trade and investment, as well as human rights and good governance. President Emerson Mnangagwa is hoping that the discussions will be seen as a sign of progress in his efforts to re-engage with the international community and distinguish his administration from that of his predecessor. We're joined now by Ryan Truscott. He's in Harare. Ryan, so which side's going to benefit the most from these talks, the Zimbabwe or the EU?
I think this will be an opportunity by the EU to really dialogue with Zimbabwe and push for reform in a way that it hasn't been able to for a long time. Since the early 2000s, Western diplomats just haven't had any access to the government. And of course, that was under Robert Mugabe. Timo Olkkonen, the head of the EU delegation in Zimbabwe, said in Harare today that these talks would provide for a frank exchange of views. And that use of the word frank does imply that there will be disagreements. The EU has been highly critical of some of the recent actions of Emerson Mnangagwa's government, especially the clampdown on protests in January over a fuel price hike. One of the key things that Olkkonen said that the EU would support Zimbabwe on is political and economic reforms. And the Zimbabwe government at the moment is under increasing pressure locally because of worsening economic hardships due to its austerity measures. So Zimbabwe is looking for endorsement from outsiders that it's on the right track.
With regard to those economic reforms, on Wednesday, President Emerson Mnangagwa signed a new bill into law aiming to get business and labour representatives more input in the shaping of policy. Do you think that's going to go very far in diffusing rising public anger over the country's economic situation?
Well, interestingly, Peter Mutasa, the head of the main labour union, the ZCTU, made some very conciliatory remarks at the signing ceremony of this new law. There have been rumours that the new law will ban strikes. Our understanding is that it won't do that, but the purpose of the legislation is clearly to try to stave off the threat of strikes by setting up a negotiating forum for business, labour and government. But despite these growing hardships, it's unclear if people have the appetite to go onto the streets right now, or even to take part in stay-at-home strikes. One such strike was called this week by a union representing rural teachers, but it appears to have only been partially followed. Some of the government workers' unions appear to favour dialogue with the government, but there are limits to what the government can offer them, because Zimbabwe's rising prices are being driven by the local RTGS currency losing value against the US dollar, and the government's unlikely to be able to keep up with that in terms of pay rises.
Thanks very much. Ryan Truscott there for us in Harare. Now, at least 6 people have died and about 50 are missing in the wake of a series of landslides caused by heavy rains in eastern Uganda. The collapses happened in the mountains around Bududa district. The area is at high risk for mudslides. In 2010, at least 100 people were killed in similar circumstances. And though the government then vowed to relocate communities living on steep slopes, several fatal landslides have hit homes around Mount Elgon since. Studies suggest that deforestation and overpopulation of the land are partly to blame. Nigeria's ambassador to the UN has been named as the UN General Assembly's next president. Tijani Mohamed Bande was chosen by member states this week. He succeeds Ecuador's Maria Fernanda Espinosa, and he said that climate change and gender equality will be amongst his top priorities. More and more Ivorian farmers are taking a bird's eye view to overseeing their crops. Drones are being used to help with the oversight and management of sprawling farms that are crucial to the country's agricultural sector. Nicolas Chemin has more.
First, you have to fill up a drone's water tank. Then you control it so that it waters a particular area of the field. This new technology is increasingly popular in Ivory Coast. Drones are not only used for irrigation, but also to collect data about the crops.
Based on data received from the drone, we're able to assess the state of the crops or areas that need a boost in growth. And we compare and contrast to find out if there are issues around water irrigation or issues around crop fertility and so on.
Agriculture is a major part of Ivory Coast's economy. According to the World Bank, it accounts for 21% of GDP and more than 75% of exports. The use of drones is on the rise, and not only in agriculture. Some businesses are now assembling and programming them in the country.
It was challenging for us at the beginning, but it's become easier over time. If we have all the pieces here, we can assemble up to 4 drones a day.
Drones, along with sensors and GPS devices, make up what is known as precision agriculture. The aim is to optimize crop growth and also to conserve resources such as soil and water.
Now, along with Nigeria and South Africa, Cameroon is one of 3 African squads that have qualified for the 8th Women's World Cup that's going to be held here in France. That kicks off this Friday with 24 teams in the mix altogether. Women's football is gaining more support in Cameroon, and the national squad, the Indomitable Lionesses, have as much of a following as their male colleagues. That enthusiasm's also seen an uptick in the number of girls heading onto the pitch. Indira Eteng tells us more.
Spectators at a stadium in Yaoundé are spellbound. On the pitch is the star of the day, Michaela Abam. Her brightly dyed hair makes her stand out from her teammates. The 22-year-old striker is one of the players to watch out for at the World Cup. For the young Cameroonian born in the US, playing for the national football squad is a dream come true. She's back in the country, crazy about football.
The crowd is amazing. I'm so thankful for the support that we have here, and I just can't wait to see what's to come for World Cup when the tournament begins.
The lionesses are now heroines to young Cameroonian girls. Many look up to stars like Gaëlle Nganamwit. She recently opened a women's football academy in her childhood neighborhood. Trainings open to young girls from poorer families, as Nganamwit hasn't forgotten how hard she had to work to make it to the top.
I decided to set up this academy because of the challenges I faced growing up to become a footballer. I don't want my younger sisters who love football to go through the same hurdles. This is my wish for them.
C'est ce que je souhaite pas.
Go, go, go!
The lionesses inspire hundreds of up-and-coming female footballers. Danielle's team doesn't have access to a grass pitch and so trains weekly on this earth's surface. This hasn't dampened Danielle's love for the beautiful game.
My goal is to become a professional player, like others. Football is my passion. I love football, and I'm happy when I'm playing.
Danielle and her teammates will be following Cameroon's progress in the tournaments closely. It is the second consecutive time that the Indomitable Lionesses have qualified. They've been drawn in Group E and will face tough opponents, including New Zealand and defending European champions, the Netherlands. They will first of all face Canada on the 10th of June.
Well, that's it for Iron Africa for now. Thanks for joining us, and do so again if you can. Take care.
French Guiana is France's biggest department and 7,000 kilometers from Paris. Its beautiful beaches and lush forests mask a somber reality. 22% unemployment, extreme poverty, dilapidated infrastructures. Its people feel abandoned by continental France. 2 years ago, anger exploded on the streets. 2 weeks of rioting and a general strike. Forced to negotiate, the government apologized and announced a €3 billion investment plan in healthcare, education and security. Our reporters revisited French Guiana. Were promises kept, or do people still feel forgotten by France?
2 years on from the unrest, we revisit French Guiana on France 24.